The desert stretched endlessly under a blazing sun. The air shimmered with heat and tension as the SEAL team moved cautiously toward the perimeter of the kill box. Each step was measured, every glance scanned the horizon for the slightest movement or shadow. They had been briefed repeatedly on the mission: high-value target, unknown dangers, and the precise timing required for success. Radios whispered static and code words, while the ground beneath them held secrets that could explode without warning. The men adjusted their gear, their eyes sharp, their muscles coiled like springs, ready to react to any threat. The silence was almost deafening. No birds, no wind, just the faint hum of distant vehicles, and the rhythm of their own breathing. They reached the first checkpoint, a ruined wall that marked the edge of the zone, and paused, waiting for confirmation from command center. The leader whispered orders low and precise, and the team split slightly to cover different vantage points. Cameras, drones, and infrared sensors monitored the perimeter, but nothing could prepare them for what was coming. The tension was palpable, every man aware that one wrong move could cost them everything. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the sand, a figure appeared on the ridge, distant at first, just a silhouette against the fading light. The team froze instinctively, hands tightening on weapons, eyes narrowing, straining to identify friend or foe. The figure moved with a fluid grace, deliberate steps that seemed to command the space around her. Even from this distance, there was something different, something that made the seasoned warriors hesitate. She wore no insignia, yet carried an aura of authority and lethal precision. The air seemed to shift as she descended toward the kill box, the heat and dust swirling around her, creating a mirage that made her seem almost unreal. The team exchanged glances, uncertain whether to raise fire or hold their positions. The leader signaled wait, but his own voice betrayed the flicker of doubt. None of them had been trained for this level of uncertainty, for the sight of one person capable of freezing even the most hardened operators in their tracks. The figure paused on the edge, scanning the area with eyes that seemed to pierce straight through the SEALs' hearts and minds. Then she lifted her hand slightly, as if acknowledging their presence, but saying nothing. The seconds stretched like hours, and the tension coiled tighter. Around them, the desert held its breath, and the SEALs held theirs, wondering who she was, what she wanted, and how her arrival would change everything. The figure moved closer, her steps measured, calm and deliberate, as if the kill box belonged to her already. The SEALs remained frozen, uncertain whether to lower their weapons or prepare for confrontation. Their eyes followed her every motion, the muscles in their bodies coiled tight, ready to react, yet unwilling to break the spell of her presence. She stopped, briefly surveying the area, her gaze sharp, calculating like a predator assessing the terrain. The wind carried faint dust across her boots, and the setting sun painted long shadows that stretched toward the team. Her aura radiated confidence and danger at once, and the SEALs felt the weight of every decision they had ever made pressing on them. The leader whispered into his radio a low code, seeking confirmation from command, but the reply was delayed. Static filled the line, and the signal flickered, leaving them alone with the woman who had stepped into the kill box. Each member of the team felt a twinge of doubt and awe mixed together, a cocktail they had never experienced before. They had faced insurgent snipers and ambushes, yet none had moved through their zone like this. None had commanded silence like she did. Their instincts screamed caution, their training demanded engagement, yet their senses told them she was different. Suddenly she crouched, slightly adjusting her gear, as if sensing the subtle vibrations of the ground beneath her feet shifted in the sand. The team noticed a faint glint on her wrist, a device unfamiliar and deadly precise. Her eyes flicked toward the nearest ridge, scanning and calculating the unseen threats. She moved forward again, and the SEALs followed instinctively, their weapons ready but their hearts pounding in disbelief. They realized she was not just entering the kill box, she was taking control of it, commanding it with presence alone. A distant echo of movement reached their ears, a whisper of metal against rock. A shadow flickered in the corner of their vision, but before they could react, she turned sharply, her body fluid and precise, and the shadow froze as if obeying her unspoken command. The SEALs could not tell if it was friend or foe. The desert seemed to hold its breath as the tension thickened. The leader signaled caution, but the urge to act was overwhelming. Each second stretched impossibly long, and the team understood the rules of engagement had shifted. The woman had arrived, and with her presence the entire mission landscape had changed. The shadows danced closer, and the SEALs felt the first real sign of danger approaching, fast and unstoppable yet unseen. And then she paused, lifted her hand, and the world seemed to stop around her, leaving everyone waiting for the next move that could decide life or death. The shadow hesitated, frozen in place, as if sensing the presence of the woman in the kill box. The SEALs tensed every muscle, ready to react yet unable to move. Their eyes never left her as she scanned the terrain like a hawk spotting prey. Each step she took was deliberate, her gaze unwavering, and the air around her seemed to vibrate with quiet authority. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of dust and metal across the sand, and the distant echo of movement warned that danger was near yet unseen. The Leader signaled the team to tighten formation, silent hand gestures passing along orders without words. Their training kicked in, instincts honed over years, ready to respond to threats invisible to others. But even they could not anticipate the force that had entered their zone. The woman crouched slightly, her fingers brushing against the ground, her senses reaching beyond what seemed human. Her eyes flicked toward a cluster of rocks, a small rise and a shadow. Moving against the fading sunlight, she moved again, and the shadow froze completely, the air thick with tension, as if time itself had stopped. The seals whispered among themselves, silently questioning who she was, and why she commanded such power. Without a single word, the radio crackled with static fragments of messages from command, none offering guidance, only heightening the uncertainty. Each heartbeat felt amplified, each second stretched into eternity. The team could feel the weight of history and reputation pressing down on them as she advanced methodically through the kill box. Her presence was magnetic yet terrifying, her calm a stark contrast to the chaos that threatened to erupt. The shadow shifted again tentatively, and the woman responded instantly. A slight tilt of her head, a flick of her wrist, and the danger recoiled as if invisible strings controlled it. The seals exchanged glances, awe and fear mixing in a potent cocktail they could not name. They realized that no training, no experience could have prepared them for this moment. The desert seemed to close in around them, heat and dust twisting in the fading light, while every instinct screamed warning yet demanded patience. She moved closer to the center of the kill box, where the tension was thickest and the unseen threat seemed strongest. The seals followed cautiously, every step measured, every sense alert, and then she paused, turned slightly, her eyes narrowing toward something they could not see. The air grew colder, the shadows lengthened, and a low rumble whispered across the sand. The team stiffened, knowing something massive, unseen, and unstoppable was approaching fast, and that their next move could decide the fate of everyone present. As the wind shifted, she raised her hand signaling pause, and the seals froze once more, suspended between action and reaction, waiting for the moment that would define the battle in the kill box. The air trembled with anticipation as the unseen threat drew closer. The seals' muscles tensed, ready for the moment of confrontation, yet unable to break the spell of the woman in the kill box. Her eyes scanned the horizon, sharp and calculating, as if measuring the distance between life and death. With a single glance, she moved slowly, her steps deliberate and precise, each motion commanding attention even from the most battle-hardened warriors. The shadows around them shifted and twisted in the fading light, creating illusions that made it impossible to distinguish friend from foe. The team remained frozen, their instincts screaming danger, yet their training telling them to wait. The ground beneath them vibrated faintly, the echo of something massive approaching, sending chills down their spines. She crouched slightly, her hand brushing the sand, her fingers tracing invisible lines. The seals watched in awe as she seemed to map the terrain without words. Her presence radiated control over the space around her, even over the unseen forces threatening their mission. A faint glint of metal appeared among the rocks, the wind carried it toward them, and the seals realized they were about to face more than they had anticipated. The woman adjusted her gear, eyes narrowing as she assessed the danger before her. The shadow moved again, testing boundaries, and she reacted instantly. A flick of her wrist, a tilt of her head, and the shadow froze as if caught in a trap. Only she could see. The seals exchanged quick glances, their hearts pounding, disbelief mixing with admiration. They had faced ambushes, sniper fire, and explosive traps, yet none had commanded such absolute control in the middle of a kill box. Her calm intensity contrasted sharply with the chaos building around them. Each breath was measured, each heartbeat amplified, the desert holding its silence as if waiting for her to strike or speak. The unseen threat shifted again, the rumble growing louder, sending dust and small stones skittering across the ground. She took another step forward and the shadow receded slightly, but the tension remained thick and suffocating. The seals followed cautiously, their weapons ready but minds racing, trying to anticipate her next move. The wind carried distant echoes of movement, the promise of imminent danger approaching fast and unpredictable. The woman paused at the center of the kill box, her eyes narrowing, and a low hum seemed to vibrate through the air. The seals could feel the charge building around them, knowing that the next instant would either unleash disaster or reveal her unparalleled skill. The desert seemed to hold its breath, the shadows danced, and the unseen threat crept closer, leaving everyone suspended in a moment of fear, anticipation, and awe, wondering what she would do next. The silence broke with a faint metallic click echoing through the kill box like a warning bell. The seals stiffened, their eyes darting to every shadow, every ridge, every corner of the sand that could hide an enemy. Her gaze remained steady, unflinching, as though she had been expecting this sound all along. The wind shifted again, carrying the faint smell of oil and gunpowder, a sure sign that weapons were already trained on them, unseen but very present. The leader signaled for cover, but she did not Move. Instead she raised one hand slightly, palm open, commanding stillness. The team obeyed, even against their instincts, their trust shifting slowly from protocol to her authority. The vibration beneath the ground grew stronger, like the approach of armored vehicles grinding through sand. The SEALs had prepared for many scenarios, but this one was different. The battlefield itself seemed to bend around her. She stepped forward into the very heart of the kill box, her boots sinking slightly into the soft ground, her figure outlined against the darkening sky. The enemy emerged suddenly, shadows breaking into armed figures, their rifles gleaming in the dim light. The SEALs swung their weapons up, but before the first shot could be fired, she acted. Her body moved with the speed of lightning, her hand reaching for a device at her waist. A sudden pulse of sound rippled through the air, invisible yet powerful enough to stagger the enemy in their tracks. Dust swirled violently, the desert groaning as the vibration shook the ground. The SEALs froze, staring in disbelief as the attackers faltered, their weapons wavering under an unseen force. She remained calm, her eyes locked on the threat, her stance unshaken. Her presence was more commanding than the crack of gunfire, more effective than explosives. The enemy regrouped quickly, snarling shouts in a language the SEALs barely recognized. They were trained mercenaries, hardened fighters who would not fall easily, yet even they hesitated, their confidence shaken by the lone woman who seemed to bend the battlefield to her. While the SEALs exchanged glances, torn between opening fire or waiting for her next move, she lifted her chin slightly, a silent command that seemed to echo louder than words, and the team obeyed, holding fire as the standoff intensified. The desert was now a stage, every shadow a player, every grain of sand trembling under the weight of impending chaos. The mercenaries stepped closer, their rifles steadying, their eyes narrowing with intent. The SEALs held their breath as tension coiled tighter than ever, and just when it seemed the firefight would erupt, she moved again, faster than any of them could track, and what followed shattered the fragile silence. The silence shattered in an instant, her movement blurred faster than the eye could follow. A flash of light erupted from her device, sending a shockwave that rattled the very air around them. The mercenaries staggered, some dropping to their knees, while others stumbled back, their weapons clattering against stone. The SEALs seized the opening, shifting into formation, rifles raised, sights locked on targets, yet still waiting for her unspoken signal. She advanced through the chaos, her presence unwavering, her steps controlled, as if she had orchestrated this moment long before the enemy tried to recover, their shouts echoing through the kill box. But each attempt at regrouping was broken by her precise intervention. A flick of her hand redirected the team, a sharp glance warned of snipers hidden among the rocks. Every gesture carried purpose, every second stretched with unbearable suspense. The SEALs had fought alongside legends, but none compared to this figure who moved like shadow and fire combined. Her calm radiated strength, and her silence spoke louder than thunder. She was not just surviving the kill box, she was mastering it. The ground vibrated again, heavier than before, as though something larger was moving in from beyond the ridges. The mercenaries reacted with renewed fury, their weapons spitting fire across the sand. Bullets tore through the air, forcing the team into cover, shards of stone exploding around them. The leader barked orders, but his voice seemed drowned by the storm of gunfire. She remained exposed in the open, yet untouchable, her body weaving through danger with impossible precision. Every bullet seemed to miss by fractions, every movement guided by instinct sharpened beyond comprehension. The SEALs felt the sting of adrenaline pumping through their veins, their trust in her solidifying with each impossible motion. She raised her weapon, finally unleashing a precise burst that dropped two enemies instantly. The shock rippled through the battlefield, the mercenaries faltering at the display of both skill and dominance. Yet the danger had not ended, for the rumble grew louder, shaking the very ground beneath them. Something massive was coming closer, engines growling, steel grinding against rock. The SEALs exchanged grim glances, realizing reinforcements were rolling in, armored and relentless. The woman turned her head slightly, her eyes gleaming in the dim light, and the team understood she had anticipated this from the start. The first armored silhouette emerged on the ridge, its cannon tilting down toward the kill box. The sand trembled under its weight. The mercenaries regained confidence, and the SEALs tightened their grip on weapons, bracing for impact as the woman took a single step forward into the path of steel and fire. The armored vehicle loomed above them, its turret turning with menacing slowness, the grinding of gears echoing across the kill box. The mercenaries shouted with renewed confidence, believing the tide had turned in their favor. The SEALs scrambled for cover, pressing against the ruined walls and shattered rocks, their weapons ready, but their chances of piercing the steel beast slim. She did not move. Instead, she stood alone in the open, her gaze fixed on the advancing machine as though it were prey rather than predator. The wind carried the hiss of hydraulics and the distant thrum of more engines approaching from beyond the ridge. The leader whispered into his comms for support, but the line was silent. Command offered nothing, only the static of isolation. The team exchanged tense glances, torn between obeying orders and trusting the woman who had already done the impossible. Her hands adjusted, something on her wrist, a faint glow sparking Against the fading light she crouched and placed a small device onto the sand, its surface pulsing with strange energy. The ground around it began to hum, a low vibration spreading outward like ripples in water. The armored vehicle hesitated briefly, its gears grinding. Its operator clearly uncertain. The mercenaries urged it forward, shouting in defiance, yet their voices trembled with cracks of doubt. She rose slowly, her stance unwavering and her eyes sharp as blades. The hum grew louder, dust swirling in strange patterns around her boots. The seals felt the ground quiver beneath their knees, their hearts pounding in unison with the growing rhythm. The machine fired a single shell, the explosion ripping stone apart where the team had taken cover. Yet even as dust and shrapnel rained across the kill box, she did not flinch, her hand lifted as if in command, and the device answered, releasing a surge of energy that raced across the sand. The armored vehicle shuddered, its lights flickering, its turret seizing halfway through its turn. Sparks erupted from its hull, the steel giant groaning as though dragged down by unseen hands. The mercenaries gasped, some retreating instinctively, others raising rifles in futile desperation. The seals watched wide-eyed, realizing she had not just neutralized the kill box, she had taken control of it. She moved again swiftly, her hand motioning the team to shift position closer to her as the ground itself seemed to fight against their enemies. Another rumble echoed in the distance. Louder, heavier, more engines approaching. The mercenaries rallied, their courage bolstered by numbers as silhouettes appeared on the horizon, rolling closer with dust clouds trailing behind. The woman narrowed her eyes, and the seals knew this was only the beginning of something far greater waiting to strike in the kill box. The horizon darkened with dust as more armored vehicles emerged, their engines roaring like thunder rolling across the desert. The mercenaries cheered, emboldened by reinforcements, their rifles raised, their boots pounding against the sand. As they pushed forward, the seals shifted positions quickly, their weapons tight in their grip, their eyes locked on the encroaching tide of steel. And men, the leader whispered sharp orders, but his voice betrayed the weight of uncertainty. For all their skill and firepower, they knew numbers this heavy would overwhelm them. She stood at the center of the kill box, her silhouette cutting through the dust and chaos, her presence unshaken. Her hand brushed against the device, still pulsing in the sand, its glow stronger now, spreading arcs of faint light across the ground, as if drawing lines invisible to all but her. The seals exchanged wary glances, unsure if they were witnessing advanced technology or something beyond explanation. She raised her arm slowly, and the humming grew louder, the vibration rattling the stones at their feet. The lead armored vehicle slowed its treads, grinding, sparks flashing against steel, as though the very earth resisted its advance. The mercenaries faltered mid-stride, their shouts wavering, their confidence cracking under the pressure of something unseen. The seals used the hesitation to reposition rifles, aimed scopes, tracking targets, but their eyes always returning to her. Every movement she made seemed to bend the rhythm of the battlefield. She advanced a single step forward, and the desert answered. The pulsing glow spread wider, lines etching faintly through the sand like veins of fire, tracing a path through the kill box. The mercenaries fired in panic, bullets spraying wildly, but each shot seemed to vanish, swallowed by dust and shimmering air. The seals crouched lower, bracing for impact, but nothing struck. She lifted her other hand, and the glowing lines converged in a sudden burst of light. A wave of force erupted outward, blasting sand into a storm that blinded the enemy. The armored vehicles screeched, metal grinding as they buckled against the unseen energy, their turrets spinning aimless, their operators disoriented. The mercenaries stumbled, some collapsing, others retreating blindly through the storm. The seals covered their faces, shielding their eyes, their ears ringing with the unnatural roar that swept across the battlefield. When the storm settled, only silence remained, broken by the groan of crippled machines and the ragged breaths of shaken men. Yet the horizon was not empty. The dust parted just enough to reveal even more shadows approaching from beyond the ridge, an army greater than any they had faced before. She lowered her hand slowly, her eyes unblinking as she prepared for what came next, and the seals knew the true battle had only just begun. The silence lasted only a breath before the horizon erupted with movement, an entire line of vehicles advancing, flanked by waves of mercenaries, their silhouettes cutting through the haze like a tide of darkness. The ground shook under their weight, the vibrations pulsing through the sand into the bones of every man in the kill box. The seals tightened their formation, their weapons steady, their eyes fierce, though each of them knew the scale of what came was beyond any mission they had faced. The leader pressed his calm again, desperate for command, but only static replied, their isolation absolute. She remained in the center, her gaze fixed on the storm rolling toward them, her face calm, as though this was the moment she had been waiting for all along. The device in the sand pulsed brighter, the lines of faint fire stretching farther across the ground, marking patterns none of the seals could decipher. She took a step forward, and the energy hummed louder, the desert answering her presence with power. that made the air tremble. The enemy drew closer, their shouts echoing, their rifles raised, their confidence soaring with the weight of numbers. The first volley of fire cracked through the air, bullets tearing the ground and walls around the team. The SEALs returned fire, precise and controlled, but the sheer volume pressed against them like an unending tide, and still she did not flinch. She moved her hand, slowly tracing a motion in the air, and the glowing lines responded, shifting, snapping together into a lattice of light that rose like a barrier before the team. Bullets struck the barrier and dissolved into sparks, the impossible wall absorbing every round. The SEALs gasped, disbelief etched on their faces, yet none dared question it. They used the moment to counterattack, their fire cutting down mercenaries struggling to advance through the sand. The armored vehicles pushed harder, engines screaming, cannons lowering, ready to unleash destruction. She raised her other hand, the glow from her device intensifying until the kill box itself seemed alive with light. The air rippled, the sand quaked, the armored giants shuddered as though weighed down by invisible chains. One vehicle halted, its engine choking, smoke pouring from its vents. The SEALs pressed harder, their shots finding targets, yet they all knew the tide was far from broken. More shadows crested the ridge, a second wave larger than the first, the battlefield now stretching endlessly into chaos. She turned her head slightly, eyes narrowing as though measuring every enemy, every machine, every shadow closing in. The SEALs braced their weapons, hearts pounding, and realized the final moment was coming, the moment where either she would unleash her full power or the kill box would consume them all. The kill box trembled like a living beast, straining under the weight of violence, the air thick with dust, smoke, and the electric hum of the device at her feet. The second wave of mercenaries surged forward, their shouts piercing through the chaos, their rifles spitting fire as the armored vehicles ground closer, cannons lowering to unleash devastation. The SEALs fired with precision, but their bullets felt like drops in a storm too vast to contain. The leader barked orders, pulling his men tighter into formation, yet even he felt the creeping weight of despair pressing against his chest. She stood unmoved in the center, her eyes locked on the endless tide, her calm a defiance against the chaos. Her hand hovered above the device, and the glow expanded, veins of light streaking outward like lightning trapped beneath the sand. The mercenaries hesitated, fear flickering in their eyes, but they pushed forward, desperate to drown her in numbers. The armored vehicles roared, their treads grinding stones into powder, their turrets locking on targets. A single step forward and she commanded the battlefield. The light erupted upward, pillars of fireless energy spearing into the sky and cascading outward. A shockwave blasted across the kill box, throwing men from their feet, splitting machines apart, their steel groaning as if crushed by invisible hands. The SEALs shielded themselves, their ears ringing, their bodies rattled by the force. When the dust settled, silence returned, broken only by the groan of ruined metal and the gasps of survivors. The battlefield lay scattered with wreckage, mercenaries crawling through sand, disoriented, broken, defeated. The SEALs stared wide-eyed at her, their disbelief giving way to something deeper than respect. She had not just fought the battle, she had reshaped it, bent it to her will. Yet even as victory seemed clear, the horizon shimmered again, not with soldiers or steel, but with something else, something larger beyond comprehension. The lines of light beneath the sand pulsed erratically as though the earth itself strained against the power she had drawn. She lowered her hand, her chest rising and falling in slow control, but her eyes betrayed what the team feared. This was not over. The leader stepped closer, ready to ask who she was, what force she commanded, and why she had chosen this battlefield. Yet before the words could leave his lips, she turned her head, slightly scanning the horizon as if listening to a voice none of them could hear. Her silence spoke louder than any answer could. The kill box was quiet again, but the SEALs knew this was only the end of one battle and the beginning of something far more dangerous waiting just beyond the desert's edge.